So change how you see, second step. The elephant in the room, change how you see disappointment. I think the elephant in the room is the gold mine in the room. And just like with how you see disagreement with the elephant and the blind man, this is about changing how you see annoyances into assets. Every time you encounter a disagreement or an annoyance and you don't have the world you want, it is a huge opportunity to learn. And then that learning is a huge opportunity to see you move forward. And again, the wisdom of this is all over the place. I'm going to give you like, I think 3 samples, but I could give you hundreds. So Nassim Taleb, who's a really amazing thinker, I'm a huge fan of, stressors are information. The book Influencer says setbacks aren't permanent roadblocks, but signals that need to keep learning. Peter Senge says great teams aren't devoid of conflict, they make conflict productive. So again, train yourself to see every elephant in the room, i.e. any uncomfortable situation or disappointment, as this new information that can help you kind of move forward. Now there's 2 types of kind of elephants in the room. One is the kind of basic one, like the squeaky wheel that just needs grease and it's easy to fix. There's others where you just can't kind of figure out how to reconcile them. So I want to introduce to you this new technique called integrative thinking, which may help you resolve dilemmas when you're trying to make the most of 2 kind of choices and you can't pick between one or the other. So integrative thinking is what the technique is called, and it's been led by Roger Martin, who is another Canadian and absolutely brilliant. So this is a lot of words, but I wanted you to have it and we'll like kind of walk through it. So the ability to face constructively the tension of opposing ideas instead of choosing one or the other at the expense of the other, generates a creative resolution of the tension in the form of a new idea that contains elements of opposing ideas but is superior to each. So that's a lot of words that I wanted you to have, but the essence of this idea is the power of the genius of and. So rather than ors, think of and, which is just like trying your best to combine the superior elements of each idea to see if it can create even a new idea. And Roger kind of explains this in a way that provides a tool that can kind of help you dig deeper on how to actually do this. He says step 1 is to recognize that your thinking is not reality, but a view of reality. So the fact that you did your mental model check-in has you already ahead of the game when it comes to integrative thinking. The next step, though, is Roger Martin says when it comes to thinking and deciding, everybody kind of goes through 4 steps. So one is salience, which is where you think about what features do you see as important. The next is causality, which is how do I make sense of what I see? So of the things I think are important, how do they actually causally interrelate with each other? Then there's choice architecture, which is, okay, I know my salience, I know causality, what task will I do and in what order? And then finally is resolution. How will I know when I'm done? Okay. So what the point Roger tries to make is when it comes to thinking and deciding with these 4 choices, conventional thinking does it in a very different way from integrative thinking. So when it comes to salience, the traditional way of thinking goes limited consideration of features. So let's keep it simple. Like how many times have you heard that when someone's grappling with a problem? Oh, we need to keep this simple. Whereas integrative thinking for salience, like what is important, they expand the features that are considered salient. So it's like, let's add more factors that we're going to consider as important in helping us determine what to do. Causality, once again, conventional thinking, simplified consideration of causality. Again, let's keep things simple. Whereas causality for integrative thinking goes, let's think of causality not just as linear, but multi-directional and non-linear of how things as a system kind of interact. Choice architecture for conventional thinking is sequential, independent piece of consideration. So let's consider this, then let's move on to this, and then let's move on to this. Whereas choice architecture for integrative thinking is you visualize the whole while working on the individual parts, but you're always keeping track of how they plug into the whole. So it's the iceberg model kind of thinking, the one that kind of focuses on the bottom of how everything is kind of connected in the choices you make. And then resolution, readily acceptance of unattractive trade-offs. It's just the way the world is. We have to kind of make do, we have to settle. Whereas integrative thinking goes, let's search for creative resolutions of tensions. And again, you'll see the theme here is rather than kind of being cowed by difficulty, it's being excited by it, saying, oh, there's something going on here. Let's figure out what's really going on to see how these actually relate to each other. Now, I know this is like a mouthful and it's actually in the workbook. So I'm actually going to kind of walk through a specific example. So around the 1970s, believe it or not, there were two choices of hotels. There were ones that had rooms of 200 and less, which is like kind of like the small one in the bottom of your screen, or the ones that had 750 rooms or more. And the models basically was for the smaller one. There's not a lot of amenities in your room. You might be lucky if you get a TV. There might be an ice bucket down the hall. There might be one bar with one restaurant, but because there's fewer people, the staff kind of know you. With the bigger model, it's because we have more and more people, we can afford more and more perks and amenities. So with the bigger hotel, you can get conference rooms, you can get banquet rooms, you can get multiple restaurants and stuff like that. But the downside is because it's so big, you're just one face among many. So you lose that kind of connection. And Four Seasons said, do we really have to choose between these two? Is there not another model we can have that can actually have the higher value of the larger hotel, but still like the smaller kind of intimacy of the smaller hotels? So they looked at their choice architecture. So remember how I said salience is more features are considered salient? So back in the day, hotels and the models really looked at kind of four things that were important. They looked at location, they looked at size, they looked at the decor of the room, and they looked at the amount of staff you have. So Four Seasons wanted to keep that in mind, but they wanted to look deeper. And they wanted to look into what do people really value? What do they really want? And what's interesting about this is when he asked people what they thought of as like good service and what they really, really wanted, initially they didn't really know. They had to dig deeper as to what people were really frustrated by. So again, that harkens back to the iceberg model where we don't really know what we value. So as he explored the conversation, he noticed that people that travel frequently really miss home and they miss being at the office and the kind of annoyances of where you don't have your office and things like that. And what was interesting about that, again, is when you ask people, because most people in the hotel industry thought that you need to focus on luxury. Four Seasons got the insight that luxury wasn't necessarily just accommodations. Luxury was how you were treated. So believe it or not, they realized what they need to think about is the comforts of home or the office. And in this case, they were the first ones to come up with having shampoo in the showers. They were the first ones to come up with having makeup mirrors. They were the first ones to come up with actually having a desk. And you can see they're all about helping people feel more like at home and getting rid of the inconvenience of not being at home. And all these things that I'm talking about, I totally realize are ubiquitous. Like every hotel you go to now probably has those. But that's just a sign of the wisdom that they had, is because they noticed this before anybody else, they revolutionized the market. So what they decided is we can actually have a smaller hotel that charges a bit more because we focus on providing the comforts of home. And again, they were the first one to do that. So now let's talk about causality. So for causality, as I told you before, the two models, people thought, well, what determines what you can charge is what size of hotel you are. Are you 750 and up, or are you around 200? And then if you have a big hotel, you need a big staff. But the hotel industry did not kind of consider staff and size of hotel interrelated any more than that. The insight of Four Seasons is if I want people to feel that they have the comforts of home, quality of service is absolutely key. So I need to teach my people that they are valued and empower them. Whereas most of the hotel industry, although they needed big staff, they thought them as cogs in the machine. So they did tons of supervision, and there was tons of like attrition and turnover. And they knew people aren't going to stick around because people don't like working in hotels, but we'll just keep replacing. And that's my theory of causality. Four Seasons said, if we actually treat people like they really matter, I can get better service and they'll actually stick around. And believe it or not, back in the 70s, they were the first to kind of institute training of staff, promotions from within, better staff facilities. So you see how they had a deeper view of how these factors, i.e. people and hotel, actually link together. So if you want to truly provide premium service, you got to treat your employees well. So let's move on to choice architecture, where the whole is visualized while working on the individual parts. Most in the hotel industry would go, okay, the sequence of choice is this. Let's decide the size of hotel. Based on the size of hotel, that's going to determine what HR or what design for the hotel we're going to use. And then that's going to determine our HR policies and things like that. So do one, then do another, don't really see them that connected that much. Four Seasons turned that around and said, I want to decide about a certain hotel, and the hotel I want it to be is going to influence all of my other decisions. So the kind of hotel I want to be embraces the golden rule. So the golden rule is we're going to treat others the way we would like to be treated. And absolutely, around the 70s, other hotels would parrot that they were doing the golden rule. But Four Seasons changed that by saying we really mean that, and it influences every other decision we make. So for example, we're not going to have human services department or customer relations department because everybody's job is customer relations. So you can see it goes past just mouthing it to saying this is going to influence not only the hotel overall, but each individual choice I make. So they made always choices based on embracing the golden rule. And then finally, resolution. They found a reinforcing system that revolutionized the industry. So the fact that they treated people, their staff, better, yet led to a better service. The fact that they looked at the comforts of home, made better decisions in terms of amenities provided, and that revolutionized the hotel. They, I think, are still the biggest hotel chain in the world. They won tons of awards, and it's now, again, revolutionized the way people see the hotel industry because many of the things they embraced are now embraced by other hotels. And that's the power of integrative thinking, where it can, if you're stuck on something and feel like you're having to choose between things, these are techniques that can kind of get you unstuck. And what Roger Martin says about this process is it's like embracing compounding complexity so that you kind of open what you're willing to think, and it seems like really complex, almost like too complex, so it's brain overload. But if you stick with it and see how things are connected, you eventually see those patterns, and you can use those patterns that you've now realized to create something that no one else has kind of imagined. And he has this closing quote, which again is a mouthful, but I wanted you to have it. He goes, when we move away from a world where there are only two opposing and discrete boxes that decisions can be put in, right or wrong, and again, how often have we talked about getting rid of that right-wrong dynamic? We start living in the continuum between extremes, and there's so many ideas and so much power in the continuum between those extremes. And he says, making better decisions stops being about right, wrong, or right, but about calibrating among all the shades of gray. So rather than black, white, right, wrong, there's this world of gray, and it's just this fantastic world of insights. And the fact that you mentioned gray and that most elephants are gray made me love the quote all the more.